Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Funhouse, along with my good friend Martin Popoff. What's happening, Martin?
Yeah, well, it's not nothing much. I mean, we're sort of not doing this on a Friday because we're traveling Friday. I'm certainly are you traveling Friday? I'm definitely driving all day Friday to get there. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not that long of a drive, but I have to go pick up George and Lewis in the afternoon on Friday, and then we're going to head to Poughkeepsie. So, for everybody wondering what the hell we're talking about, Saturday is SOT Fall Fest, which is tomorrow because you'll be watching this on Friday. Martin's traveling all day. I've got a lot to do, so we're actually recording this earlier in the week because these things do happen here on the channel. So it's actually not Friday right now that Martin and I are talking, but it's Friday that you're watching. So there you have the whole story. But yeah, we hope to see you guys tomorrow at the Chance in Poughkeepsie. We're getting ready for that, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, we got we didn't want to not have programming for you here on Friday, so we came up with a cool topic. Actually, this is Martin's topic, and this is all about a discussion of bands who, as they became more commercial, we kind of like them better. Right, so bands that started off in kind of like one little bucket, as my dog busts into the room here, and but they over time their music became more commercial. Maybe they became a bigger band, and in our case we actually liked them better the more the commercial they got. That's kind of the gist, right, Martin?
yep, exactly. Yeah, and this was actually an idea by Bill Zwerts, who's a viewer or listener of History in Five Songs, my podcast. I'm not sure what he was responding to or what he was suggesting for, but he kind of came up with this, and I thought, yeah, kind of good idea because I get a lot of suggestions on the Facebook. And so I started filling out my list, and yeah, I decided there were definitely some like this. This almost falls into it falls a little bit into, or it has an echo of the episode we did where we go all you need is the greatest hit sort of thing.
Right.
I found it had some overlap with that, and I also find going through this exercise that it falls in line with an episode I did of the podcast called Cusp Albums, where there seems to be that one album right in the middle that's the transition album, and a lot of people like that more. And why is that? Do they like a mix of the commercial and the early more obscure stuff, right? So I've noticed that with a few of my examples. But should I dive right in with my first one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my first one is I'm going with Husker Du. So the amazing, legendary Minneapolis, late period, late for dinner punk band. Kind of like there's a lot of these bands, right? That start their legendary career way after punk actually happened, sort of thing, but they're punky. And essentially Husker Du was quite unlistenable in the early days, as far as I'm concerned. Zen Arcade is a double album, and it's pretty noisy. It's kind of like a cross between the album I'm going to talk about, their last one, Warehouse Songs and Stories, and Trout Mask Replica in a way, or Metal Machine Music or something like that. Not really, but essentially, a double album, everybody pays attention to double albums even more, right?
Oh,
So it like gets a serious look in, and a lot of Husker Du fans like it. But as far as I'm concerned, the next album is the Cusp album, and a lot of people consider this the greatest Husker Du album. But as far as I'm concerned, I like them when they get more commercial at the end of their career for things like Candy Apple Gray. And then their very last album is another double album, Warehouse Songs and Stories. This actually had a sticker that had this stuff on it, so it's got no text on it at all. There's a band shot. So essentially, what they did is they kept that crazy, weird, quite hard to love buzzsaw production value sound that was their trademark, and really it's kind of like an ill-advised strange trademark. The drums, the snare is really snappy, and the cymbals are loud, and the guitars are really sort of screechy and buzzsawing. They kept all that. This is Bob Mould, by the way. So Bob Mould goes on to a massive solo career with lots and lots and lots of albums of different kinds. He mixes Husker Du style stuff, or Husker Du or whatever. You get the umlauts going there. It's a Swedish board game, apparently, with some electronic stuff as he goes on. Funny thing about Bob Mould as well, he's a wrestling expert. He writes wrestling scripts.
really?
So kind of a neat thing. Yeah, I had an interview with him, and that was kind of his main job after Husker Du was a guy who writes the storylines for wrestlers. But anyways, so later on in their career, kind of their last three albums, I suppose, and again, half of New Day Rising sort of thing, they started feeding that little sugar rush of melody in there a little more, and all the fans of the early stuff, their ears perked up and go, wow, that's kind of anthemic, kind of catchy, kind of hooky, and those are the songs that people like Celebrated Summer, and even the opening track on New Day Rising, very anthemic, but still very, very hardcore and punky. And the band is like, basically they have one arrangement. It's guitar, bass, and drums. It's heavy throughout. Sometimes there's some acoustic guitar, but the point is that on the later albums, there was quite a lot of melody there, and those are kind of their most famous albums. That's when they were more or less an it band for a little while, and that's the Husker do I like. So it's a little bit like that, that saying that we said in that greatest hits episode. I like my Husker do pretty, right? And Kim Mitchell famously in the Rush movie says, I like pretty Rush, so he was trying to say, oh, the mellow poppier Rush later is the stuff I like. I like pretty Rush. So that's it. That's my first example of Husker du, band I like when they got more commercial.
I had a bunch of friends in college who were into Husker or Husker du. I remember everybody saying Husker du. I don't know how you pronounce it. And yeah, they're just a band that just never, I remember hearing some things here and there, and that was as far as it ever went with me. So I couldn't even tell you one song. I remember some of them were into the Smithereens as well. Husker du, the Smithereens. It was like this group of bands that people were into that was kind of fit that kind of post.
There's no reason for you to like them. I can't see any reason really for you to like them, because it's pretty ragged, raw punkiness in a way, but yeah, this weird production thing that they decided on, right? There might be an episode there of some sort where we find bands that really stuck on a production that's hard to love, and they said, this is our trademark sound. This is a perfect example of that, and I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but they were definitely one. So yeah.
All right, my first choice today is Thin Lizzy. So this is a band who, pretty humble start, right? Irish band who early on did this kind of like Irish folky blues rock type thing. You've got the original trio, Brian Downey, Phil Lynott, and Eric Bell, and they produce this trio of albums here. Okay, which has some good material, but not, this band was not selling much with these albums. Vagabonds of the Western World, probably the most accessible of the three, but a band really trying to find their way. And sprinkled among some of these albums here, you've got, like I said, you got this weird mix of styles, which not for the casual music fan. Lots of folky stuff, occasionally these bursts of hard rock, which we would, come to know and love from this band, little bits of blues, little bits of pop, just kind of puzzling albums that I find mildly interesting. But I think if Thin Lizzy would have continued on doing this sort of thing, I don't know if they ever would have been the band that they became. But then all of a sudden, Eric Bell leaves the band. They bring in two guys to replace him, Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson. And all of a sudden, they start putting out these albums that are a little slicker, much more rock oriented. The kind of folk aspect, the Irish folk aspect, is kind of like fallen by the wayside. Even really the blues is fallen by the wayside. And now all of a sudden, you see this like, hard rock. The pop kind of still stays on this album, especially. You got a little bit of kind of like soul, a little bit of R&B that kind of always kind of sat in the music of the band. You got Fighting came out, the band getting heavier, they're developing this whole twin guitar thing, and then by the time you got albums like Jailbreak, all of a sudden you're seeing The Hitch. Obviously, the boys are back in town. You got Johnny the Fox, really accessible album. And again, this band should have been a lot more bigger than they were, and that's a whole story for another time about all the things that have happened in their career that kind of stunted their ascent to superstar, is what they should have had. Black Rose, and of course they move into the 80s with Renegade and Chinatown, and then finish it all up with Thunder and Lightning. But to listen to like these albums and then these, it's like a completely different band. And for me, this is okay. Do I ever visit these albums? Almost never. Can I play these quite often? Absolutely. And here the band just they sound like they know what they want to do. They've got the guitars cranked up. It's sophisticated. It's catchy. It's melodic. It's rocking. And that's kind of not really what this is. Like I said, these are kind of a curiosity, good for what it is. But this is the Thin Lizzy that I like. And I still talk to people occasionally who absolutely adore this part, the early part. But for me, I find this exactly where the band kind of became the band. And even, The Boys Are Back in Town was their one big hit. This part of the catalog is littered with could have been hits. And yeah, so easily this was the first band I thought of when we were talking about doing this, because they became more commercial. They instantly became more appealing to me, and probably most people as well. But yeah, there you go, Thin Lizzy.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I would have off the top of my head disagreed that they ever got more commercial as they went on, but you made a great argument for the fact that when you look at the albums as a whole, with all the different styles on them, A, that's one reason that they're not very commercial, and B, you could say that once they got into that groove, they wrote songs, like you say, that were hookier and hit you straight between the eyes. Maybe the songwriting wasn't very commercial at the beginning, but yet the styles on their own, like, everybody, the big trope in hard rock and heavy metal is, oh, your mellow songs will be your hits, right? Like that's writing a hit. Well, just write a mellow song, it's going to be a hit, right? And there's a bunch of mellow songs there and stuff, but you're right, there's an interesting the songs might not be commercial, and the mix on those albums might not be commercial. And we shouldn't be mixing, really, we shouldn't be mixing, did they get commercial in terms of like commercial success, which is what happened with Lizzy as they move on, moderately so. But yeah, even, I guess what I'm trying to say is even their hard rock, their heavy metal, which is supposed to not be a commercial genre or type of music, was very commercial when they did it. So their songs got amazing. Their production got better, and even though they still had a weird product mix on every album kind of thing, it definitely was much more commercial. So yeah, cool. Yeah. All right, cool. So my next one is Megadeth. We talked a little bit about Megadeth on our is old music better than new music kind of thing, but this is a different sort of discussion. Like, I would say Megadeth definitely wasn't very commercial on the first three albums, or Rust in Peace, although this is a type of commercial. It's a type of, let's make a really, really, really good but still extreme and uncompromising album, and it's so good that it becomes commercial. That's a whole different discussion. But so they go commercial, I would say, 3 times in a way. And the first version is my favorite version. When they did Countdown, this is them going commercial, like Metallica going commercial with the Black Album. This is them slowing down and simplifying. I always call this the Steely Dan of thrash albums. It's gorgeously recorded. Yeah. It's the songs are just beautifully put together. It's just irresistible heavy metal. But it's definitely less thrashy. Euthanasia was like that as well. The second time they went commercial, the whole cryptic writings and risk situation was when all of us fans revolted on them. Then they went away, and Dave went into rehab, and more lineup changes and all this, and he had a rethink and stuff. And then they came back, and then it was a mix of that, you start an era essentially, with all of these albums in the middle sort of thing, your End Games and your United Abominations. Every one of these records, he subtly injects a new kind of commercial that he didn't really have on the good kind of commercial from before and the crappy kind of commercial that he had. It's more like a mid-paced, melodic, but still very heavy metal songwriting style, simplified, trimmed down. Even the thrashy stuff sounded sometimes more like SoCal punk in a way. Like he could be very melodic in like a stripped down, fast hardcore sort of way. So the technicality, even when it was technical, it was like syncopated, riffy sort of stuff with the drums, and it all fed the strength of song. So I think all the recent albums, and this is why I like Dystopia and the new one so much, The Sick, The Dying, and The Dead. because they are just really irresistibly catchy and commercial, but yet they're still very heavy metal. But he seems to want to be a guy that wants to play fast, but not particularly thrash, more like he wants to play a fast melodic version of traditional heavy metal now, which is kind of a different kind of commercial. So yeah, this is a band, I guess, add it all up. I like Megadeth when they went more commercial. 2 versions of that out of 3. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is look at the sales, right? I mean, when Megadeth decided to kind of slow things down just a little bit, get less technical and less thrashy, they became the big band that they were doing fine beforehand, but I don't think doing 3 Rustin pieces in a row was going to get them to where they got. So yeah. I think, Countdown and Euthanasia were huge albums, and they're very different than those couple albums that came before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that I like when Megadeth do both, right? I think when they do the regular, accessible metal and they do the thrashy stuff and the technical stuff, I like all of it. And that's one of the reasons why I like the new album so much, because it's all of it in one.
Yeah.
When they do it all.
Yeah. And I guess the thing we haven't said is that there was, and this came through in the reviews and everything, for the first 2 albums, and maybe a little bit of the third, I mean, there was a little hint of a fusion-y element, right? They were trying to be the intellectual, thoughtful, Mensa Mad sort of thrash band. They were saying, this is our thing. Our players are even better than all you other thrash players. And we're going to do these complicated, weird, mathematical, geometric things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've had some ridiculously great players in the band who could do all that kind of stuff. Chris Poland on those first couple albums. I mean, that guy, if you've been following him all these years, he is a fusion genius. That guy can play, circles around most players. And, and man, Marty Friedman, Jeff Young. I mean, it's some really, really great players in that band. And, even now. So, they definitely always, I think Dave, for a while, really wanted them to be the artsy thrash band. We can do all these cool little things. We can noodle, but it'll sound great. So and it worked. But then he decided to dial it back a little bit, and the music was still really kick-ass. So that's the important thing.
And that's a band without a cusp album. This idea that I mentioned of an album that's an exact hybrid of something. I wouldn't call Rust in Peace a cusp album. I wouldn't say Euthanasia or Cryptic or Risk or any of those. I mean, it's literally, he's kind of, they feel like they're in blocks as you move along through the catalog. So.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, so my next, this was kind of a weird one. I debated whether I was going to actually talk about this band here, but I think it works within this topic because, here's a band that when they first came out, they were playing what most people consider traditional Southern rock. And then they became kind of something more. I'm talking about 38 Special. So, of course, obviously, Donnie Van Zant, the founder of the band, brother of Ronnie and Johnny, put together this band called 38 Special. Their first 2 albums, self-titled and Special Delivery, sound like, what you'd expect from late 70s, early 80s, Southern rock. Not that much different than Skinner, Hatchet, Outlaws, whatever. Not overly memorable albums, but very traditional Southern rock. You got the slide guitars, you got the boogie, all that sort of thing. A solid band. But neither of these albums set the world on fire. Quite frankly, they don't set me on fire either. I like these albums. I don't think these are, when you're looking at like the history of the early part of Southern rock, the first decade or so, would these ever come up in a conversation of some of the great albums from that style of music? Probably not, but they're good. I should like these the most. That's the thing, because I love Southern rock so much. I mean, that's a crazy thing. You're going to get that in a couple of my explanations here. Some of these albums, the non-commercial years, I should love, and it should be my favorites in the catalog. But for whatever reason, these aren't. And I'm going to go against normal grain of the way I normally think and say that once the band started to get more commercial, Wild Eyed Southern Boys rocking into the night, all of a sudden they've got outside songwriters, the guys from Survivor, big production values. Rodney Mills comes in and does a great job with these guys. Their big, huge album, Special Forces, and then, of course, Tour de Force. And all of a sudden, 38 Special is not so much a Southern rock band anymore. Sure, they're still from the South. They still have the lineage, But if you didn't know anything about this band and you heard most of these hit songs or listened to these albums, would you associate them with Southern rock at all? Not really. There's no slide guitars, no real boogie anymore. All of a sudden now it's slick pop and hard rock, very much that AOR tag, right? It's no surprise that the guys from Survivor helped out with some of the songwriting. Not all that much different as far as the music goes. It's very American, yes, but and I really love these albums a lot. And sometimes, like when you're talking about some of the great Southern rock albums, I struggle at times to include these because they're really not, other than the fact that geography says it is, the guys in the band says it is, and maybe a song here or there has a little bit of that, those things that we attach to Southern rock. But these are great albums, and I like them infinitely more than these, which are, baby 38 special, right? Trying to find, we're going to be a Southern rock band. It's like, oh, but we can be much, much more. So yeah, and I will pick these over those any day of the week. As cool as these are, much, much better here. Band just sounds sure of themselves. And it's okay, I guess, for a Southern rock band to write rock anthems. Rock and pop anthems. Rock and pop anthems. Try and say that fast 3 times. And it's okay to do that, and they did it really, really well. And that's my favorite era of the band.
That's hilarious that you brought them up, because I feel exactly the same way, and it's a recent thing. I was out jogging, playing those first 2 and going, this is kind of really dull. There's not much here. Like it reminded me of like a cross between the Outlaws and Hydra and early Point Blank. And I'm going, I'm supposed to like Hydra because it's fairly riffy and stuff. I'm not a big Hydra fan. I guess I'm not a big Point Blank fan. And I've really, thought, oh, this is the absolute, golden era, cream of the crop, 38 special, not a complete baby band and not a huge band. These early ones are supposed to be sacrosanct. They're supposed to be amazing. And I totally agree with you. It's like, this is a band, when they injected a little more guitars and hooks into it, they got way better. And some of the bands famously screwed that up. Molly Hatchet, we all complain about later Molly Hatchet. We complain about later Blackfoot, although we like early Blackfoot because it was all pretty heavy. It was pretty exciting, right? But yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. That's one of these weird examples of these Southern rock bands, it working perfectly, and they sold a lot of records doing that. So,
and you have to wonder if a lot of the other Southern rock bands who decided to try and go that route and failed miserably did it because of the success that 38 Special were having.
Yeah.
But they proved, obviously, that not everybody can do that. Not every Southern rock band can go and be a huge, international success with hit singles and million selling albums and mix kind of pop and AOR with Southern rock. Because we know, Molly Hatchet's the perfect example, man. They failed miserably at that. Miserably. Blackfoot too. So yeah,
Blackfoot's a funny one because I love Siogo to death. I love Siogo, but I hate Vertical Smiles and Ricky Medlock and Blackfoot, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. All right. My next choice is reach here. Grateful Dead. So Grateful Dead, I love commercial Grateful Dead, and I have no time for non-commercial Grateful Dead. And I think Grateful Dead went commercial twice. The first time was the the folky, quieter stuff, moving on from the acid rock jam band thing that they were doing. And I like my Grateful Dead songs short with vocals, and I prefer them to write them. That's another thing that bothered me about Jerry Garcia, is he just loved covering so much, right? He's a big cover guy, right? So my entry point to the Grateful Dead, where I started like taking them seriously and learning about them and stuff, was Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. But my favorite era of the band is the Donna and Keith Godchaux era, specifically these 2 albums, Shakedown Street and Terrapin Station. And then they basically stay commercial. The band stays commercial to the end. You've got your Go to Heaven, pretty good album, and the 2 that you're not supposed to like at all, In the Dark and Built to Last, the last 2. I like them. I think they're fine. I like the recordings. They're still kind of complicated and proggy and stuff, but they're just a little more cleaned up and glossy and hooky. Like there are hooks to them, but again, I think the most commercial they ever got is when Donna is actually singing, and there are some just masterful, some of my favorite songs of all time. In fact, all of my favorite Grateful Dead songs of all time, the top, 4 out of 6 probably have Donna singing on them, which is weird, right? To be an odd kind of fan that way. But yeah, so I like my Grateful Dead as pretty as you can get it, and as pretty as you can get it is you got a female singer singing them. So there you go, Grateful Dead.
Interesting. I was thinking about you yesterday. I was driving around in the car, coming back from the gym, and I have playing in the car my CD player. I've got one of the Grateful Dead Dick's Picks live albums, and I believe it's from 1970 at Winterland. And it's got a cool mix of stuff from those a couple of early albums and with some of the long jams. And I'm sitting there driving around like, oh, Martin would like this. And then as soon as they go into a 29-minute Dark Star, I'm like, Martin would hate this, right? Just way too much of that jam and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And not like I can enjoy Jerry Garcia's guitar sound either, or his style, frankly. I'm not a big fan of, especially his sound. Like his sound, he has, speaking of what I said about Husker Du, he liked a really wiry sound, and another guy like that is Steve Howe. Like they both like that wiry, like we haven't boiled our strings are all rusty sort of sound, right?
Yeah, Jerry always had an interesting tone, and I think again, I'm not a big expert on the Dead, but a lot of folks that you talk to, they associate different tones with different guitars. They can say, "Oh, that's the period where Jerry used the SG, and that's the period where Jerry used the other guitar with the almost looked like an old BC Rich. It's angular, kind of weird looking, but apparently that guitar has a very specific tone. And I think I have a live album where he's using that guitar, and you can tell from album to album that there's something different going on. But yeah, his tones are always really different and weird and kind of like odd. You sit and listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's different, not a lot of gain on the amps, and it's kind of clean sounding but kind of dirty in a way. It's interesting. Yeah, and Steve Howe's the same thing. Steve Howe is exactly the same. Definitely a different tone.
And there's a bit
great
of
players. I mean, technically, great players.
Well, and they have a style all their own, which is interesting. It's good when people have that. But he's got kind of I think he's even said this in interviews. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but he has a bit of like a woodwind style of playing, like a sounds like a clarinet or a saxophone or something like that, or maybe flute,
which is something that like Frank Zappa always went for. So it's there are players that have done that. Alan Holdsworth was another that's got this kind of squonky kind of like sax trumpet type of thing that they were going for. They wanted to sound not like a traditional guitar, right? And that's nothing wrong with that.
It's just and also like a medieval troubadour sound, right? A bit of a lute feel to when he's playing mellow.
Yeah. But Jerry was a great player. I mean, I love listening to a lot of those old live recordings because he was a very busy player. He's doing all these little fills and things all the time. I mean, very accomplished player and definitely one of a kind. So I always had a lot of respect for the guy because if you really listen to a lot of the stuff, like I said, especially the live stuff, he's doing all sorts of little intricate things all the time that adds a lot to the music of the Dead. So it's a good choice. All right. So again, here's another example. And again, this is an interesting pick here because I started listening to the band during this period that I'm obviously favoring, but it's one of those bands where you go backwards and you think, oh, well, their first couple albums are in a style that I really like. I like a lot of bands who play in that style. But then when you go backwards and you listen to those first couple of albums and you're like, yeah, not really. And the band is UFO. Again, I love this early 70s blues rock, space rock type of thing, right? So you got these first two albums, of course, was Mick Bolton on guitar, basically the same lineup as the classic era of UFO, but instead of Schenker, you got Mick Bolton on guitar, 1 hour of space rock, right? And long songs, kind of blues rocky, right? They got a little bit of Cream going on. You can hear, maybe some of the things, especially on the second album that like Hawkwind were doing at the time. But it's kind of messy. The songs aren't really memorable. I don't think Phil is really coming to his own as a singer. And, I occasionally talk to people who say that these are the greatest UFO albums ever. And I'm like, really? I mean, Martin, when was the last time you listened to either of these two albums?
I think they're both disasters. I think they literally sound like demos from a band who has no idea how to write songs or even play.
Yeah. Right. Again, there's maybe a couple songs here and there that are pretty good. Right. But for the most part, I just find these fairly uninteresting. They're okay for what they are. But if I've listened to these once each in the last decade, that's probably a lot. So obviously they get a new guitar player in the band. Michael Schenker comes over from the Scorpions, and all of a sudden they start to write, catchy, anthemic hard rock fare. Maybe not quite as much on the first album, Phenomenon, with Michael, but as we kind of go along, you know, I mean, Let It Roll, Shoot, Shoot, Out in the Street, Mother Mary. I mean, these are songs, and Natural Thing, I'm a Loser. All of a sudden, and again, this is kind of like the Thin Lizzy thing. This is a band that had tons of great songs, should have been enormous. It's a shame that other than like Doctor Doctor and Boys Are Back in Town, you have these two bands who just cranked out all these great songs, and yet they weren't like mainstream successes at all. But this is the period that all these albums, Lights Out, Obsession, even going into the 80s, where arguably they get even more commercial sounding, No Place to Run and Mechanics and The Wild, The Willing, and The Innocent. All these albums are just showing a band that knew how to write melodic, catchy songs. It was hard rock. I don't know if I'd ever call this metal, but hard rock. There's pop in there. Singer-songwriter stuff. I mean, all wrapped into one. Great guitar work, great vocals, bluesy as well. And that to me is the UFO I like. And they later on, you had all sorts of lineup changes and things, and they started experimenting with other things. I like this period. So we're looking at like 74 to like 85 for me, which I feel is UFO at their most commercial. Granted, they were never a big commercial success, but that's the UFO that I like. All right, they're not doing the bluesy space rock thing. They're doing compact rock songs with great guitar work, great vocals, memorable melodies, lots of hooks. That's the UFO I like.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. Starting with Force, it really all the way up to the very last album with Vinny. I mean, they've had almost a uniformly elevated version of commercial all the way through, with slight personality differences along the way. And then yeah, we're all I know both you and I are sort of like, it concerns us that we don't like the Vinny albums very much, right? And why is that? I mean, I always like to generalize badly, but I always chalk it up to sort of like a bluesy beefiness to the songs. It's missing any of the Euro vibe. It's missing whatever Tonka brought.
Yeah, they're a little too bluesy for me. They're a little too bluesy.
Yeah, and so even though they're still commercial songs that are 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes long, verse, chorus, all that stuff, what they're missing is kind of some weird hookiness, or hookiness often enough throughout them, yet they're still commercial. And even those weird Schenker albums, like Sharks is not, I don't like Sharks very much. So there's that, what's the other one they did around that time? Anyways, Covenant. Yeah. So both of those, I feel like are missing the hooks the same way the Vinny albums are missing the hooks.
Yeah, Walk on Water has them to an extent. Yeah, Sharks and Covenant are weird albums, because I agree with you. I don't find much of the material all that memorable. Schenker's guitar playing is great. Phil sounds great. The band sound great. The songwriting to me isn't there on those two albums for whatever reason. Where I find on Walk on Water, it kind of is. Maybe not 100% of the time, but there are songs on there that I right off the bat I can think, all right, yeah, I remember that song. And then you go to Sharks and Covenant, and you're like, yeah, could I hum any of those songs to you right now? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably. They just didn't stick with you. And I find much of the Vinnie Moore era the same way. It's good, when you listen to it, you're like, yeah, this is pretty good. But are you like, do you have that pull to listen to it 5 months after you get it? Not really.
Yeah. And I'll take this opportunity again to say Mogwai Chocolate Box is a smoking UFO album, with Jeff Coleman on guitar. Man, that is just, I mean, I think that is probably the greatest guitar performance on a UFO album, including all the Michael albums. I mean, that just, the songs are super hooky, and yet it's still really complicated virtuoso guitar at times. It's relentless throughout. Edge of the World is not a good album as far as I'm concerned, at all. But I think Chocolate Box, man, had they been able to put the UFO name on that that probably would have wound up in my top 3 UFO albums of all time.
Yeah,
That thing is just a masterpiece, start to finish.
Jeff Coleman is one of the great, like, unknown guitar players out there.
Yeah.
Great player.
Yeah. Imagine if we got 7 or 8 UFO albums with Jeff Coleman. That's blows my mind. So, okay. So my next choice is XTC, which we've talked about before. We did the ranking episode, but one of my favorite bands, but I have sort of decided that the post-punk version of the band, so the white music, then you go to second album, and then you go to Drums and Wires. And I think Drums and Wires kind of really describes the early version of XTC, the early sound. So it's a band that's trying to be very different and quirky, and almost for the sake of doing that. And the songs just come out as really weird and wiry and herky jerky and nerdy. And so that sound from the band is not my favorite sound. I think when they go commercial, and these guys kind of do have a cusp album, I think English Settlement is a really nice blend of some beautiful songwriting, and still, the pretty tough, hard-hitting, rhythmic guitar, bass, and drums sort of feel. But then, then they become quite commercial. This is a double album where almost the challenge is that it's going to be mostly almost like a version of prog mixed with post-punk, but with acoustic guitar quite often. And then you get into, the kind of my favorite era of the band is this sort of much more melodic, much more straightforward in a way, but just not frantic sounding, and like on a coffee jag sort of sound, especially Skylarking, produced by Todd Rundgren, absolute masterpiece of an album. So yeah, this whole era, they basically stayed commercial throughout after that, but I think there's definitely a big pronounced difference between the first 3 plus the cusp album, and then you're into a sound. It's still challenging. It's still, you have to be kind of like an intellectual, snobby pop guy to like XTC. They're kind of like a smarty pants rock band, right? But not smarty pants metal, of course. And that's why I swear to God, I swear, you fell into the trap of ranking XTC because people threw around the word prog quite often, right? See, like when people call them prog, I think you were intrigued by, well, really, are they kind of a prog band? Okay, I'll check them out, sort of thing. But it's a weird version of prog, right? Just the same way post-punk is a type of prog. They're not really, right? But they have that strong Beatles vibe in the mellow stuff that they did as well. So when they went commercial, it could still be challenging with the arrangements and weird and interesting and maybe some odd drumming, but there was a lot of melody, and I think that's missing on the first 3 albums.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you on this one. Those first 3 albums are interesting, but for me, the real XTC came out after that. And the whole prog thing with XTC is interesting because they're not a prog band, but they are one of those pop / post-punk, bands that most prog fans really like a lot. But to say they're a prog band, not really. Because there was a comment on some video recently, it might have been one of the prog seat shows, where XTC came up in the conversation and someone took offense in the comments and like, there is no way on this earth that XTC is a prog band. I'm like, yeah, I would kind of agree with that. Even though there is an intricacy and a layering effect and a real dedication to really in-depth production values that I think has similarities with some prog bands. But is the music prog? No.
Yeah, it's like a Pet Sounds, Beatles, ELO, 10cc, the challenge of building an interesting, complicated song thing, but still kind of putting it in a pop world, right?
Right, exactly. So speaking of ELO, great segue, Martin. ELO is my next band I'm going to talk about. So this is another example of one of these bands that I should like the non-commercial period better than the commercial period, but it's not the case. So of course we know the history of ELO. They kind of morphed out of the demise of the Move. We have Bev Bevan and Jeff Lynne and Roy Wood putting together this band called the Electric Light Orchestra, and as a way to mix classical music with rock, whereas the Move kind of did that too, but they were more like coming from a psychedelic framework. Here, the psych is pretty much gone from the music, and it's basically just chamber rock and classical. And you have these weird but really kind of cool and charming albums that come out, initially, that are as uncommercial as you can get. And it's just weird. You got, cellos and guitar and acoustic guitar and bass and drums. And it's just very militaristic, very, very English and intriguing, but not for everybody. It's funny because people who are only interested in the era I'm going to talk about next, probably the first time they hear this stuff, they're probably like, "Oh, that's the same band." Yeah, it is the same band, pretty much. So they start to Roy Wood leaves the band, which I think is step one to them incorporating more pop elements, because history tells us that Jeff Lynne, an enormous Beatles fan. So while he still likes this whole idea of classical and rock together, he's a Beatles guy. He loves pop music. So here you have albums like On the Third Day, which still kind of holds on to some of the strange aspects of the first two albums, but all of a sudden bringing in more accessible songs. Then they do this whole big concept album with, an orchestra. We're still not quite there yet, but all of a sudden, with Face the Music, now we've got hit songs, right? Well, we had Can't Get Out of My Head from this album, but here we've got, Evil Woman and Strange Magic. These are pop songs, right? Then you've got, my favorite couple albums from the band, A New World Record, which is basically pop music with a little bit of rock and the classical element, but the classical element is used less in an avant-garde way, more in a pop way to enhance the songs and to give them just a little bit more oomph. And then perhaps their out and out classic, which is the first one I ever bought from them and still to this day my favorite, Out of the Blue, double concept album. It's pure pop music, but again with lush orchestrations, both from an orchestra and from keyboards. And then they took it even one step further. They incorporated a little bit of disco into that element here as well, even more commercial. So for me, when it comes to ELO, easily, maybe this one, but these are the albums that I play all the time. And whenever I talk to anybody about ELO who's really not a fan, this is the period that I'm going to steer them towards, even though they would, really drop the classical part of it completely in the 80s and go for more of like a pure pop. In essence, their biggest era was when they did both really, really, really well. And that was those middle period albums. So.
Yeah, interesting. That's another band that I don't know well enough, but I periodically go back and play them and stuff. And I was playing some the other day, and who they reminded me of the most was Wings. Just this strange sort of English. We've talked about doing an episode on drummers as timekeepers. Like, this is a band, and same with Wings. It's like the drums are just there to just go tick, 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 while everything else goes on around them, right? Sort of thing, right? But yeah, it's I would agree with that as well. I want them to get away from too much of the strings and too much of the progginess and into the hits. They were amazing at doing hits, right? So, yeah, and the 10cc thing lines up as well with those guys, right?
Yep. Funny you mentioned Wings, because back when I was a kid, ELO and Wings were like two of my favorite bands before I really got the Kiss bug. So yeah. Interesting.
All right, my last choice is Manic Street Preachers. So this is a band that were hyped in the beginning, and this is the other thing with us Westerners from North America, America or Canada, and the Brits themselves, have a love-hate relationship. Well, it's mostly a hate relationship with the hype machine of the British press and hyping these bands and blowing them up and tearing them down. And all the bands complain about it. It's like, oh, all you want to do is, build us up. We're gods. And then soon as that hits, the press wants to tear us down. And apparently the press has all this power over there and all that kind of thing. So Manic Street Preachers falls right into that, because you're moving into that Brit pop era where that really became prevalent. But so the first two albums got a lot of that hype as sort of a cross between The Clash and Guns N' Roses. They're quite riffy, quite heavy, quite high octane. And it's got this kind of pretentious name of the band, Manic Street Preachers. I always felt that same way about the Tragically Hip, right? Those two names, they grate on you, right? They sound like the kinds of names of bands where the band would like going on in life, they'd say, we kind of regret calling ourselves that. It was like we thought we were two fancy boys, right? But the thing with them is that I'm not a big fan of that heavier, rockier early version of the band. And then Holy Bible happens. And this to me is a little bit of a cusp album for them. And then they go through all the drama of their guitarist, Richie Edwards, the only guy I can think of in this situation, disappears. He basically, he's presumed dead, but he disappears. He's presumed drowned, but I don't think still to this day they ever found the body. So he basically is gone, but they can never really declare him dead. And I even looked on the wiki page, it just says disappeared, February 1st, 1995, age of 27. So this is his last album with the band. Lot of, again, cusp album. A lot of fans consider this the greatest thing they ever did. This is my expanded reissue of it. It is absolutely, a classic, and it's deserving of this sort of thing. But my favorite version of the band is the post Richie era, when this is one of my favorite albums of all time. Everything Must Go, with we've got A Design for Life, Kevin Carter, Elvis Impersonator, like the whole Everything Must Go. It's absolute just banger after banger in terms of, but they're pretty and pastoral and melodic. They've really toned down the electric guitars. There's more acoustic, more organ. They could be a little proggy in an XTC sort of way. And then they're always going to do a little bit of everything on later albums. There's your Lifeblood and Journal for Plague Lovers. They're all basically about the same for me in terms of quality. Send Away the Tigers. So, I mean, the title track from this, Send Away the Tigers, is just a beautiful, lush, heavy kind of pop song. They also, when they turn the guitars back on, they can be fairly distorted. There's a song on here called Your Love Alone Is Not Enough. It was a single. It's just an absolute genius bit of pop songwriting, and this absolutely super smart commercial use of repetition in the vocals. They really strike you as a smarty pants band again. And the lyrics are very, very literary. And I always joke also about the lyrics, where it sounds like they have no regard for phrasing at all. I know I've said this before, but it's really funny, where it sounds like there's a bank of lyrics and they just try to cram them all in. So the accents are going all over the place, and they have to speed up and slow down to fit them in. And sometimes it sounds a little unnatural, but beautiful voice, the singing, the complication, the surprises. But when they hit this commercial thing, and they're still in it, I mean, they still make lots of albums all the time, but they're still in this more commercial phase where it's pretty Manic Street Preachers, instead of the band that sometimes gets denigrated as a third-rate Clash or whatever, or something like that, or that Guns N' Roses thing was a big thing, because it was pretty riffy and up tempo and heroic, and it really sounded like at one point that they would be this band that would be an English version of a challenge to Guns N' Roses, but a more thoughtful version, sort of thing. But Manic Street Preachers, love the pretty period. This is I'm on record all over the place. There are lists out there where I've got this in my top 10 favorite albums of all time. There you go.
And with that album cover, you can totally tell a change in direction a little bit compared to the other ones.
Exactly. Yeah. And only 3 guys on the cover, so they're showing Richie's missing, and this really artistic Everything Must Go, and below it, it's got 2 parentheses with nothing in it, right?
Yep.
Kind of cool. So, yeah.
I would love to know the history of how they came up with that band name.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, it can be a turnoff. And but yeah, really interesting band if you want to study the art of songwriting and hear some real top shelf songwriters.
Cool. All right, my last pick for today is a band that basically got their start in the late 60s as more of like a Chicago blues style band with lots of psychedelic elements in their music. And eventually they morphed into a just really good pop rock band that had hits galore. They had a lot of albums that they put out prior to them becoming the big sensations that they became. And I've heard all of them, and they're just not all that appealing. And I know some people who prefer non-pop music will swear up and down that the early works of the Steve Miller Band is where it's at. And I would argue that for me, not really. So, I bought this anthology. I had this on LP back in the day. And for whatever reason, this was one of those albums that I saw staring at me in the album racks back in the late 70s. And I was like, oh, I'm going to check that out. And because I had heard another song by the band and that I really liked on the radio, and of course it wasn't on this, and listening to this, and I'm like, this isn't really all that appealing. It's got some blues, got some little country stuff, it's got a couple psychedelic songs. It's whatever, right? But of course, after that kind of period, they found a bit of success with an album called The Joker. Again, I'm talking about the Steve Miller Band, by the way. The Joker all of a sudden signaled a new direction for these guys. It's just a good, easygoing, breezy, like California style pop rock song. And they took that to the next level with Fly Like an Eagle, which of course had a number of really big hits still to this day. You got Fly Like an Eagle, you got Take the Money and Run and Rockin' Me, which are just really good, easygoing rock songs.
There's an album cover that doesn't match what's inside, eh?
No, not at all. Yeah, because you look at this and you're like, oh, cool, Guitar Hero. And yeah, look at this. He's playing the guitar upside down. This looks amazing, right? And, you look at the back and, overall, it's not a big rockin' album. But, you mentioned it before, songcraft, right? There are great songs on this album. There's a little bit of blues. There's some pop on here. There's, you got a kind of weird poppy song, Dance, Dance, Dance. But man, the hits are great. And, it's got a really cool sound. They're starting to use cool synthesizer elements on this album. And then it kind of all culminates in Book of Dreams, which, I still think this is a terrific album. I was completely into this. And of course, young Pete Pardo could not resist that album cover, right? For one, but man, Jet Airliner, Swing Town, Jungle Love, Sacrifice the Steak, great songs on here, great use of synths. I mean, they incorporated all these little synthesizer interludes, which are almost like prog rock like, but in between you get all these just great pop and rock songs, and so accessible, so catchy. There's a reason why Steve Miller Band became such a huge sensation for those number of years. And they did, one more album after this that did really well, but then I think they got away from what kind of brought them to the dance. And just went back to writing, just kind of regular bluesy rock songs. And I think they lost that kind of pop, that anthemic nature of their songs, which made them so big for so long. But yeah, I mean, these two albums for sure. Parts of this album for me is what I want to listen to when I want to hear Steve Miller Band. And yeah, there's some cool things going on pre that. There's all these other albums that came out before these, and some of it's okay, but I don't find it all. It's not very accessible. It's not very memorable. Yeah, there's some good guitar playing. There's some good jammy stuff. It's kind of bluesy, kind of psychedelic, but I don't know. For me, it's all about the pop stuff from these guys. That's what I like. Definitely the more accessible.
Yeah, the master of the little novelty ear candy lick or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or the little turn of phrase or whatever. He's almost like the dude from the Big Lebowski, right? It's like
Yes.
It's like so small and gauzy, and it sounds like everybody's recorded sitting down. It's the most laid back thing, right? It's like Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville thing, but it's Steve Miller sort of thing. So it's
when you hear it's so basic, but it's like it's so good.
And the drums are like a little offbeat, and then there's this little trash cymbal thrown in. It's like it sounds like everybody's stoned, right? And
probably
yeah,
were.
Yeah, it's so warm and accessible, right? Yeah, like a perfect choice. Like from such an extreme in the early days to that.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't be more commercial sounding than those Steve Miller hits. You
Right.
literally couldn't.
Right. And
They
those
almost
early
sound like
albums could be,
children's music, right?
in
I
a
mean,
way,
they're
yeah.
literally verging on that.
It's
Yeah.
music for everybody, yeah. And the early albums is music for the very, very few. It's just, yeah, it's so anti-commercial. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, got a few honorable mentions.
Sure.
Just run through quickly. Amorphous. Amorphous started as a doomy, scary band and became a quite light prog band. Enslaved became one of the great, post modernist prog bands of all time. Opeth is kind of the same thing. They're fitting right in there with Enslaved and Amorphous. Pink Floyd's an interesting one, right? I mean, they obviously were not very commercial with Ummagumma and Adam Hart Mother and Metal and that stuff, right? And then they became very commercial, a pretty interesting version of commercial. And then Mastodon, you could argue, cleaned up a little, I suppose, got more proggy as time went on. And then, two I didn't want to talk about at length because I have talked about them a lot, of course, is both Genesis and King Crimson. I'm a big fan of accessible Genesis. I like that commercial period before it went too far, though, right? I like that middle commercial period. And then King Crimson, I could argue that, the red, blue, and yellow version of the band, but it's not very commercial. So I felt you got to disqualify all of King Crimson because none of it's commercial, right?
Not really.
Yeah. And I mean, literally now they're even less commercial than those uber non-commercial versions of the old band. It's like I call it car crash music now, right? It sounds like a big car pileup, right?
Yep.
10-minute instrumentals of crazy noise and whatever, right? So
what's interesting about King Crimson is, like, for those of us that are fans of the band in general, you listen to those 3 albums that came out in the 80s, and to us it's kind of commercial sounding compared to everything else. But if you were to play someone who'd never heard King Crimson before and play them Discipline or Beat, they'd probably like, what the fuck is this, right? Because it's really not. To us it kind of is, because listening to like Core of the Crimson King and Islands and Red and all that stuff, which is so not commercial. To us, we've kind of accustomed our ears to say, oh, but 80s King Crimson is very commercial. It's really not at all. But we've convinced ourselves that it is.
And the funny thing about it is the album covers are very commercial, right? For those 80s ones. So you get one, it just says King Crimson. You got a little image in the middle. It's red. You're calm. Yeah. And then the next one comes out and they're not challenging you at all. They're just, we're going to change out the color. We're going to change out the symbol. And then they do it again on the yellow one. It's like, okay. So, and they're very modern looking. They're very 80s. They fit right in the whole synth pop, New Romantics thing, New Order, whatever. And so yes, something about the album covers makes what's inside seem even more commercial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have 2. My first one is Triumph. Again, Triumph early on, with their first couple of albums. I mean, these are good for what they are, but it's just a weird mix of stuff. Maybe the songs aren't all that memorable. It's kind of bluesy. It's kind of rocking. There's boogie on there. It's just like, it's okay. And I think once Triumph kind of figured out that, we could become like arena rock darlings, in which they did on Allied Forces and going forward, they became a better band, I think. And I know for me, that's the Triumph that I usually reach for. And then this is probably not going to be very popular, but for me, while I find lots to like on the early Fleetwood Mac blues albums, I kind of like them better as they got more commercial. I really love the Bob Welch era, and that's sort of more commercial, but not overly so. The Bob Welch era for me, I think, has a lot of more accessible stuff on it. But man, when they brought in those 2 Americans and all of a sudden became huge, I mean, that's the Fleetwood Mac that I generally reach for. And not that I don't like the Peter Green era or the Bob Welch era. I do. There's lots to love on those albums. For me, Fleetwood Mac became the better band once Lindsay and Stevie joined the band. They became more of this kind of like California, pop rock band, or whatever you want to call their music, right? Because Fleetwood Mac's music is pretty unique. So yeah, that's the 2.
Nice, good choices. Yep, cool.
There you have it, everybody. We will leave you with that. And the only thing left to say is hopefully we'll see a bunch of you tomorrow at the Chance at Poughkeepsie, New York. Martin and I go on at, geez,
3, I think you said.
I think 3 o'clock or something like that. So if you're coming to the Chance for Fall Fest tomorrow, I would say get there early. Don't miss the afternoon sessions at the Loft. It's like one big building, 2 stages, right? 2 different venues attached to each other. So all the panel stuff is going to be going on at the Loft, and then after we break for dinner, all the music stuff is in the Chance on the big stage. So Martin and I will be going on, mid afternoon, but Martin's going to be walking around with the microphone during In the Prague seat and Hudson Valley Squares, taking questions from the audience. So we'll all be pretty active during the afternoon, participating in what's going on. But before we go, Martin, you got anything new posting this week on the Contrarians or the podcast?
Not particularly. The podcast is every single week, so that's the audio podcast. And what did I do? I did worst consensus songs, short-lived genres. I also went and recorded some in advance, so I'm all discombobulated there on what's going on. But yes, so we've got History in 5 Songs podcast. All my books are at martinpopoff.com, and looking forward to hitting the road, driving all day Friday, 9 hours to be there. And and we're going to do, it's going to be a shortened amount of you and me talking, and then like you were saying, there's going to be a lot of Q&A as well. We can answer questions, and then great bands all night.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Some cool bands, some legendary bands. It'll be great. And, most of the Sea Tranquility folks will be on hand. So we're really looking forward to it. And our sessions will go quick. We've got loose topics set for all 3 of them. But we fully understand that that's probably going to be derailed pretty quickly just to take questions from you guys in the audience. So we fully expect that. So coming up here on the channel, we've got, the show must go on, right? So even though we will be having fun in Poughkeepsie, you will have programming on the channel. So we've got the UK connection tomorrow. We've decided to do a kind of like a twofer episode. So we were originally going to do ranking the songs on classic album episode with Def Leppard Hysteria. We decided to do, because there was a bigger hit album for both the UK and the US, we decided to rank the songs on both Pyromania and Hysteria back to back, because Pyromania was really the album that really broke the band here, but over in the UK it was Hysteria that was a bigger album. So we're going to do both of those. That's coming up tomorrow while we're at Fall Fest. You'll be watching that. For those of you who can't make Fall Fest, you'll be watching it at home. And then Jamie Laszlo and I will be ranking the albums of The Sword on Sunday. Again, recorded that earlier this week, because Jamie will also be at the Chance in Poughkeepsie this weekend. So that's coming up on Sunday. So then, of course, we got the Hudson Valley Squares on Monday. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please check out martinpopoff.com for all of Martin's latest books. And we'll see you all the Chance tomorrow. For Martin Popoff, I am Pete Pardo. Aloha, everybody.